As two practicing physician assistants, we've seen a lot and we've heard a lot. We know that you've heard a lot too. We are here to help you navigate through the BS by having open and honest conversations with other practicing professionals. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Cassie, and welcome to Mindfully Woman.
Hello, and welcome back to another great episode with myself, Heidi, and my co-host,
Cassie.
And we are going to talk today about risk reduction specifically for cancer, things in our day-to-day life that maybe you think about, maybe you don't think about. And specifically, we're going to hit on 5 big topics.
Yeah, 5 main, what we like to say, pieces of the puzzle that may lead to cancer. And some of them are modifiable, and some of them we just sort of have to deal with and try to reduce our risk in other ways.
Yeah. And I think the first one we want to dive into first is genetics. That's one thing people ask a lot about, especially nowadays, because cancer and cancer genetics is like on the forefront, really, I would say in the past, 5 to 7 years, this has become a major
It has
thing.
boomed, like testing in general and awareness and ease of testing and cost of testing. All of it has greatly improved and has made it a lot more accessible to patients, and a lot more providers are getting comfortable with ordering it. So the more data we collect, the more we can link genetic mutations to certain cancers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And in our specialty, so just to preface back again, we are in breast care services. So we see breast cancer patients, and we follow direction of our governing body, which is the American Society of Breast Surgery. And they do recommend that really all new diagnoses that come through the door have genetic testing done. So that's what we do as a specialty. That does not mean that everybody does or everybody should or what have you. It's all, like we always say, very personal to you. So always consult with your medical team. But to dive into genetics, a lot of people think maybe a cancer does happen because of a genetic mutation. But in reality, a really small percentage of cancers do come from a genetic mutation. 5 to 10% of the time, cancers happen because of having a genetic mutation.
Yeah, and a genetic mutation that has been inherited. So a lot of times we deep dive into your family history. Has there been a certain pattern of cancer in a family? Has there been an abnormal amount of cancer in the family? And so that raises our suspicion. And so then we can go ahead and do genetic testing. In our case, if you don't already have a breast cancer diagnosis, but then that makes us worry, okay, well, maybe there is something more going on, and there is a mutation that's been passed down and causing this in your family.
Yeah. Yeah. And specifically with breast, BRCA, a BRCA mutation, there's BRCA1 and there's BRCA2. That is one of the highest risk breast cancer causing genes that we know about, like one of the most concerning and well-known mutations for breast cancer. But it does act as an umbrella in a way where breast is super high risk in that category, but it can also increase risk for ovarian cancer. It can increase risk for pancreatic cancer, melanoma at times, and prostate cancer, which does change a little bit based on having BRCA1 or 2. But that is a big one that we are always looking for. And not only does it increase risk of having one of those cancers, but also increases risk of having a future cancer, which is a really big deal.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like to tell patients it's not, you don't have this cancer now. And especially, so breast cancer patients are always concerned, well, does this mean I have another cancer? No. It just means that you might be at increased risk for a future cancer. And the goal is to increase screening. And so if it's something with colon, it may mean more frequent colonoscopies. For breast, it might mean prophylactic mastectomies or doing MRIs and mammograms. And so we base it off of what the mutation is, your age, and also personal preference.
Yeah. And I think people do get scared about that, where they're like, oh, I'm definitely going to get this cancer. Now, we talked about BRCA, but there are also other genes that increase risk of breast cancer that aren't as high as a BRCA gene. Like there's some like a CHEK2 mutation or an ATM gene mutation. And we don't jump to doing a prophylactic mastectomy right away because that risk is lower. And also we talk about family history, et cetera. But I agree I tell my patients, this is statistics. We're
Yeah.
running on
numbers.
statistics. This is not a 100% that you're going to get a cancer, but we do our best to screen and we do our best to prevent and catch something, of course, early or do what we need to do to take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that too, specifically, and one more piece of the genetics, there is a population we always ask about when patients come to see us too. So Ashkenazi Jewish people, so people who have ancestry and they know of it, that were Ashkenazi Jewish, they do have a higher risk of having a BRCA mutation. Actually, about 1 in 40 Ashkenazi Jewish women have a chance of having a BRCA 1 or 2 mutation. As compared to the general population, that's about a 1 in 400 chance.
Wow.
So you go from 1 in 40 to 1 in 400.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant and definitely a thing that, make sure you tell your medical team if you are Ashkenazi Jewish too.
Yeah, and I think the different genetic tests out there, like 23andMe, what's that other one? That you can do that it's more of like your heritage. I believe that tells you if you have Ashkenazi Jewish.
Yeah.
It's not it doesn't tell you anything about cancer genetics, but it does tell you from a heritage standpoint. And so I do have patients who are like, yeah, actually I found out on this genetic test.
That they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people do it. I don't know of any other ones. I know 23andMe is like one of the most popular.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I can't off the top of my head right now.
That's okay.
Yeah. I will say one more thing. I get a lot of questions like, oh, well, should the men be tested too? Or does it skip a generation? Things like that. Yes, men should be tested, and no, it doesn't skip generations. And so that's where they don't really tell us like they have sons, but if you have sons, they should be tested as well if you test positive. And then with that being said too, with children, if you were to test positive for a genetic test or genetic mutation, then each child has a 50% chance of inheriting, up to a 50% chance of inheriting that mutation as well.
Yes.
And so then it just trickles down from there.
Yeah.
And so that's where getting tested, or at least telling your providers what your family history is, can be really helpful for your whole family.
Super important. Yeah, I agree. I think people sometimes too don't think about like the family implications, like their own siblings who then they also have kids. So you've got nieces and nephews, and then your own kids who want to have their future kids. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Super important to think about.
Yeah. And definitely like even in our population, like our breast cancer patients, we have 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds. Like they don't necessarily care as much if they have a genetic mutation. It just is what it is. But a lot of times they say, well, I'm doing it for my children.
Yeah.
And I think that is really important, because if they have children who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, we can make a big difference.
Yeah.
And prevent cancers from happening.
Agree. Yeah. So genetics is super important.
Absolutely.
Another thing that is really important is lifestyle.
Yes.
Which we talked a little bit about before.
Definitely.
On our first episode we did together.
So of course, nutrition is huge, and we will not bore you again with all of those details, but nutrition is a big factor in your lifestyle, and what you eat matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked about before, trying to eat as clean as you can, organic as possible, washing your fruits and vegetables, paying attention to the sources where you buy them,
definitely
locally grown. Do they use a lot of herbicides and pesticides? Try to do as much market research as you can. And then of course we talked about all the protein, fats and all that things already. So, trying to eat lean protein and healthy fats and all that stuff, it does really make a huge difference. With your how you feel, and then two, risk reduction for cancer. And two, I'll
add to that, your processed foods. And so like your fast foods, your sweets, the artificial sweeteners, things like that, your sodas. So many people can't give up the sodas, but they're actually quite horrible for you.
Yeah.
For a cancer standpoint, but also just an overall health, diabetes, high blood pressure, all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the things medically.
Exactly. So just being more cognizant of what you're eating and how it actually is impacting your health. And, what if you cut back on it significantly? How are you going to feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll definitely feel a lot
big
better.
Difference.
Another huge thing we did dabble with before, but didn't get quite too specific with, was alcohol consumption. And I think that is a big thing in today's society.
Huge.
I know, younger generations, people in their 20s to 30s, it's really kind of taken hold. And we're seeing that from a cancer standpoint, I think, in a way. Like, we're seeing risks of breast, but we're also seeing risk of colon and some GI, gastric, other esophageal cancers too. And I really do think alcohol has a big factor in that.
That's why I don't know if you've seen like all over, I don't know, I must be in the algorithm, but all over my social media is the Surgeon General is wanting to release an advisory or updating the label on alcohol, saying that it can cause cancer. It's like the third leading cause of cancer, the top 5 being mouth, throat, voice box, esophageal, breast, liver, colon, and rectum. So that's a lot of cancers.
That's a lot of cancers.
And so it has been known to cause cancer, or it has at least been something that is studied significantly. So now they're actually looking to maybe do something about and just actually put it in people's faces like, hey, this is a big deal. This can really increase your risk. And it actually, I saw on breastcancer.org that it actually can impact breast cancer the most. Up to four more women per 100 can actually develop cancer if they are drinking more.
That was so wild.
Even, what did I see? So in a 2021 study, in the 2021 study, the absolute risk of developing breast cancer in your lifetime rose from 11.3% to 15.3%. And that's going from drinking less than 1 drink per day to 2 drinks per day. So then that's where we get the number of 4 more women per 100.
Yeah, I mean, a 4% increase is significant.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And that's crazy to think about.
Considering that 1 in 8 women already develop breast cancer.
Yeah.
And
so if you think about
terrifying.
Already having a 1 in 8 chance, and then you're drinking 2 drinks a day regularly for a long term, I mean, your chances, really kind of go more towards like 1 in 4, 1 in 6.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's really something to think about as a consumer.
Definitely. And we've known for a while, okay, alcohol is a toxin, but how does it actually disrupt, what makes it a toxin? And so the website goes into great detail about, alcohol increases inflammation. It changes, it causes DNA damage. And so it can also disrupt hormone levels, especially estrogen and so on. And so it really impacts our health and our bodies negatively.
Yeah.
But
literally altering your DNA.
Yes.
And basically breaking it in half and making it not work as it should.
And it also makes losing weight really hard. Mm-hmm. It makes, if you have goals to lose weight, or more specifically lose fat, it makes it that much more difficult.
Yeah. And I feel like that kind of goes into, as women specifically, one, altering your hormones, like you're literally changing how like your estrogen and progesterone works. But then number 2, like inflammation, you're chronically introducing yourself to inflammation on a regular basis. And just like you said, the constant inflammation then goes to the DNA damage, and then goes to, things not working as they should.
Yeah,
so, I mean, it makes sense on why people do struggle so much with weight loss, but it does really come down to like, if you struggle, get help, really seek out those resources, whether that be, a counselor, mental health, your primary care doctor. There's a lot of things out there that do help with that. But
I will say, I do think it's really neat that the market is starting to go towards like non-alcoholic beers or different types of alternatives like THC or CBD type drinks. And so I think that's really pretty neat, and it gives people different sorts of options. Of course, there's not a lot of studies on those types of drinks, but it's something
better than
different.
Nothing.
Yeah,
and even I think they're making like low or no alcohol like liquor, like whiskeys, bourbons, things like that. Now, I do think there's still like some sort of percentage. So I don't know like how that adds up or the
like
risks.
how decaf coffee isn't actually zero caffeine.
So I don't know how.
Learn that this year.
How legitimate it is. But yeah, that does suck.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, so another thing too is like tobacco use. Of course, you've heard it a long time, years and years and years. We know smoking is leading to lung cancer. That's a huge thing right now. I mean, it has been for the past several years, but smoking or even using chewless tobacco or chewing tobacco. Chewless, I guess.
I guess you don't really chew it.
I guess you don't really chew it. It kind of sits there. But any type of tobacco products, even I would say nicotine containing products, because those still aren't like that great for you, like vaping regularly.
Yeah. And I was trying to look more into that. Like, is there actually any linked for nicotine to cancer? And the answer is maybe a little, but it's more concerned for like your blood pressure.
Yeah.
And then and it causes changes in your blood vessels, like in your vascular system. And so even we see it in breast.
Yeah, that's what
we get a ton of recurrent breast abscesses because of smoking, because of nicotine use. And so it's more in the terms of changes in your blood vessels and then leading to high blood pressure. And then if you don't control your blood pressure, heart failure.
Yeah. Which is not somewhere that you want to be.
So not necessarily from our standpoint cancer or like proven for cancer, but it's usually, as of now, the tobacco use.
Yeah. So avoid it at all cost.
Still avoid the nicotine products though, because you'll get a whole other host of issues. Yeah. Too. Yeah.
And then another lifestyle factor too. We touched about nutrition a second ago, but adding to that, exercise, back to it. Exercise is important. Exercise is great for multiple things. Of course, cancer on the forefront. We're talking about that today, risk reduction. But it's great for, increasing those good, happy endorphins, making your mood boost, making you feel better, decreasing inflammation, which depends on the type of exercise you do. Like, yes, if you're doing more high intensity or hardcore exercises or lifting really heavy weights, and data and like science and literature now, like it does increase your cortisol levels, like based on what you're doing. So it does depend on what you're doing, but in general, like long-term, just general exercise for day-to-day healthy living, you know, doing some weightlifting, doing some cardio, doing a good mix of both, pushing yourself in an adequate way. It will help you reduce your risk of cancers too.
And I like to tell patients, anything that gets your body moving and that you're going to stick to. If you love lifting weights, lift weights. Yeah. Just do it. Like whatever is going to work for you, figure it out, what works for your schedule, what you're willing to do. Yeah. There's a lot of women who like doing like Orange Theory or the group fitness classes or yoga. Again, it's just whatever you're willing to stick to and get your body moving.
Yeah. And I do feel like as women, doing group exercise classes are very encouraging because they're very uplifting. You have people there who are there for the same reasons you are. They want to be healthy. They want to see you succeed. So I do recommend, if you struggle or if you just don't know where to turn yet, maybe go to your local gym and see what they have to offer. And
definitely.
Their classes, they have so many classes out there.
And a lot of times they'll let you do like a free pass or like a day pass or a week pass or something. They'll let you check it out and see if you like it, see if you want to be a part of it. Yeah. I think you just got to put yourself out there and
yeah. I agree.
So
anyways,
but yeah, I don't know anything else on exercise.
No, I think that's good.
Okay. One thing, we mentioned that's not really something we can fix is the environment. We can only do so much about what we do, the air we breathe, and so, or where we grew up. And that's one thing that if you can change something, then it's worth looking into. You
can't really control how you grew up.
Right.
You got to go on based on where your parents live and where they chose to grow as a family and what you were exposed to. Then we can't control that. You can't control that. That's, I guess, kind of would fall into an uncontrollable thing. But, choosing to live in bigger city centers where there is a lot of smog and there's a lot of pollution and there's a lot of things in the air. We know that big cities produce a lot of air pollution.
Yeah.
And that in general, you don't know what's in it. We don't know what's in that. And has there been many studies that have really looked at air pollution?
Not from a or I just saw something the other day, not from a cancer standpoint, but I just saw something that like it can greatly increase your risk of like depression.
Yeah.
Air pollution, which I find really interesting. I'll have to look more into it, but I feel like it's
a hard thing to control to study in terms of cancer risk.
And then too, it's like, well, what city or like how big of cities, what are the manufacturing companies around, or I don't know, but you know, like Indianapolis compared to Chicago, compared to New York, compared to like,
it's all different.
How do you, and then what if you only live here for this amount of time? Like, I don't know. I could see how that would be hard to actually control.
Yeah. I think too, like in the point of environment, just kind of like, for example, I find this really odd, but I grew up in a small town, like a small country town, but we lived way out in the country, me and my family. But in the city itself, there's a pretty high rate of cancer. I mean, it's a small town. And so like there was, I mean, at least off the top of my head, I know of probably 5 people who had a childhood cancer. And then 3 to 4 or 5 adults that had a very aggressive cancer in adulthood. My grandfather being one of them. And he lived in the town. And so it makes me wonder, like, what is there? Like, is there something there to be concerned about? What's in the ground? What's in the water? Like, to the point of environment? Like, I don't know. I do think it'd be a very good case study to do in this town. I've talked to my family about it before, but just kind of thinking about things that you might not really think about or know, like see what's happening around you, or see, you know, what do the pollutants look like in the area that you live, and can you reduce that in any way possible?
Agreed. And I grew up in a small country town, and lots of cancers. Have a friend who his aunt and uncle both had brain cancer, and they were farmers. And so anecdotally, I do tend to like, I feel like I've noticed that a lot of farming families have cancer, and I looked into that too, and it has been linked to brain cancer, but not necessarily any other cancers that they know of yet. So
definitely say
I do find that very interesting, but also all the chemicals we put on fields and the runoffs and XYZ, it doesn't really surprise me.
Yeah, which goes into the point of water and drinking water.
Yes,
unfiltered water, no good. Please avoid any kind of unfiltered water. I think it's really, really important to look into and to test. There has been evidence, and there was a study based, it was like the USGS, which is the United States Geological Service or Survey. And they tested the nation's tap water all across the United States, like all the states. And at least 45% of the nation's tap water is estimated to have at least 1 or more PFAs. And a PFA is a per or polyfluorinated alkyl substance, which is a fancy word for this has many, many, many bad substances in basically this major substance. So
lovely.
It's not great.
Yeah.
Also, there's been evidence that there's things like chlorine and arsenic and lead that are contained in the water along with these PFAs. So we are huge at pushing, like, if you can get some type of filter or like reverse osmosis would probably be like the best thing you could consider doing in your home, especially for drinking and cooking and all that stuff. And showering, really, if you can. But I think water is a huge thing that people do overlook. Agreed.
And I know that's something one of our surgeons pushes a lot.
Yeah.
Because there have been so many studies that have come out recently saying exactly what you just said about the PFAs, and how harmful they actually are.
Yeah. They're kind of they're called forever chemicals.
Yeah.
Like things you just can't really like avoid or get rid of, or really pinpoint exactly how it happened or where they came from. But she will not drink water. Like if we're at a surgery center, or really if we're at work, she has like about 6 bottles of water with her that she's brought from home in her like stainless steel cups, which I mean, I think is smart. And luckily we do have like a filter in the office, but
yeah. What about like wells?
That's kind of the same thing, because if you think of like a water well, most of those people are out in the country.
Yeah.
And then you have runoff. So you've got,
So still want some sort of filtration system, because that
you don't know how
like
it's
that's
seeping
like
into
controlled.
the well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Just with the small farming family or out in the country folks who they're
Don't
not
know any
city
different.
water, but they
I recommend getting your water tested.
Yeah.
And luckily a lot of people do have like water softeners too, which takes out things, but like how much does it actually take out?
Not quite like these PFAs. I don't believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really important too to like maybe, and I can't even say like where it would be, but like really doing research in your area and maybe see somebody you could trust who would recommend like a good water test. Because even some of the water tests that cities do, it's like a certain level of lead or arsenic that they're looking for. Like, could it still contain a decent amount? Yes, potentially. So it's good to ask, okay, what are you all testing for?
Yeah.
Get a list of that. And then
that is so scary.
I know, just kind of ask like, hey, we should, I really want to look at these things too.
I want to see
what can I do to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so I'm curious too, like, so many people use like the plastic water bottles and like it's people always say like, oh, don't ever drink water after they've been sitting in, like drink water from the water bottles after it's been sitting in your car or warming up in your car. And so that's kind of on the next point is plastics. And so plastics have been known to have BPA, phthalates, and flame retardants that when they are heated up, those chemicals can leak into your water, but then they also can leak into your food as well. And then then you're ingesting chemicals and can cause DNA damage.
And the amount of, I know microplastics is like a huge thing right now, but like the amount of like microplastics in our potentially like bloodstream or brain or what have you, like it's just kind of wild to think about, but it's crazy how much stuff is like, it's already packaged in plastic. Like,
right. What do you do? Like, what about like your TV dinners, things like that? I guess you could just like dump it out, like put it on a plate and heat it up on like your ceramic plate or something like that. But I know personally, I have switched all of my Tupperware to like the Pyrex type dishes or trying to do something more like that. And then not using like plastic water bottles. Like stainless steel. Small changes like that seems like it could make a really big difference, because like the microplastics, there are studies that it's like actually linked to colon and lung cancer. And so those can be scary.
Huge. It's significant.
Yeah, definitely.
I kind of like on that point too with lung cancer, I know that there have been more and more cases of like non-smoking related lung cancer.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's becoming more of a thing that people are aware of now. Like, okay, well, why is this happening too?
Exactly. And we don't screen for lung cancer unless you're a smoker. Yeah. Right? Or at least that's the last I knew.
That's what I know.
And so you don't really expect it until you're symptomatic, I guess.
Yeah. I think with all the stuff that's coming out too, like I know for breast cancer, we made there's like this new tumor marker, like the Signatera test that tests for like the blood and cancer cells. And I do wonder, like eventually down the pipeline, the more and more we start talking about this stuff, that there will be different screening measures that we can do based on potential risk factors for cancers. I'm kind of excited to see how medicine will progress down the road.
I mean, like blood tests that could detect like a cancer.
Yeah, which I do think there's like a Gallery test. I know that they do based on like some history or family history. If there's a level of, if there's a certain level in your blood that would signify that you have a potential cancer. And then you go down like the rabbit hole with that too.
That's super interesting. I can't wait to see where that goes and how that we'll start implementing it. Hopefully one, insurance will cover it. And then two, hopefully people actually do
something about it as well too.
Especially if it's easier. I feel like more people are much more likely to have a blood test versus mammograms, or they get their breasts smashed.
Yeah, I know. Which most women just love.
I know. It's I always say it's like it had to be designed by a man.
Yes.
Because this would have been changed a long time ago if it wasn't. Yeah. But of course, just because we say that like simply because a substance is designated as like a carcinogen it does not mean that it'll actually cause a cancer or that you are guaranteed. It all comes in, or there's many factors like how long you're exposed to said carcinogen, or these different substances that have been tested. If it's a small amount, you're very unlikely, or it's very unlikely that something bad will happen. But if it's something you do every day for many, many years, then
long term,
the risk definitely goes up.
And I think that sometimes is the unfortunate side of cancer is we don't always have the answer. We're not going to be able to say like, this definitely caused your cancer. Now, that's why typically when you go to your doctor, they're going to ask you a million questions and try to get the best possible history they can and say, hey, looks like this is probably a big exposure and a risk that you have that could have potentially caused your cancer. But that's why we tell you guys these things now, so you're aware. Maybe you could start thinking of them and change things and do something about it to reduce your risk as best as possible.
Absolutely. Just being aware and having some knowledge. The whole reason we started this podcast is so we can start talking about these things.
Yes.
Because there's so much stuff on social media, and then it's like, okay, well, what is actually true?
Yeah.
And we're trying to, obviously say,
streamline it for
this
you.
is what a study has said. This is actually tested and proven.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, another one of environment is the sun.
Oh, yeah.
It's lovely, especially in the middle of winter right now. But sun, skin cancer, of course. And
still important to wear your sunscreen in the winter.
Very, very. I know. I'm trying my best to keep on my sunscreen. But even wearing SPF 30 plus all the time.
At least, a minimum. And the sun is like a love-hate relationship because, of course, like it makes you feel good. Vitamin D, like you should get sun exposure.
Yeah.
But safe sun exposure.
Yeah.
And, like she said, wearing the SPF 30 at least, or wearing those sunblock shirts.
Yeah, they make really cute like sunblock shirts now, or like the SPF shirts, or
even jeans are even really good sun blockers too. Like I know a lot of farmers wear denim jeans every day when they're out and about, which is great, but still putting the sunscreen on like the places you don't even think about, like your neck and your ears, and obviously the face is a huge one, in your hands. I feel like hands are very forgotten as well too, because you're doing a lot of stuff with them. So I mean that's great, but then you're always chronically staying exposed to when you're outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like a lot of farmers, the back of their neck, they get that burnt. They don't put sunscreen back there, and then they get a lot of cancers in the back of their neck. And so if you notice a new spot, go have a dermatologist look at it. Yeah, they'll most likely biopsy it, and it's worth it, even if it's not a cancer. But
better be safe than sorry.
Better, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So environment was number 3 on the big list of things, but number 4 is life stressors and things in life which can be controlled, I would say, in a way, but maybe come up as, being something you can't control. So stress, we know, does increase inflammation in the body. And that lovely inflammation word loves to mess with our DNA.
Yes.
And, these levels spike because of things like in your personal life, whether that be, relationships or marriage, finances, things that just kind of bring general stress. Also work and career life can do that. Being a student, going to school, going through rigorous career changes to get to where you want to be. Even medical issues. I mean, you've got things you're trying to figure out yourself, or your doctor's trying to figure out for you. Those are all things that can cause stress and increase these cortisol levels, increase inflammation. And so we got to figure out, how do we reduce that? How do we bring it in? How do we reel it in? And how do we deal with the day-to-day life, which can be very multifactorial. I don't think it's just like one right answer.
No.
And
I don't think so.
It is hard just to like manage, With that being said, you could have all 3 of those stresses, like personal, work, and medical, could be going on all at the same time. And how do you take care of that is a big question.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, that's something that maybe we got from COVID, or a blessing from COVID, is that people have learned how to better cope with their stress, like their emotional stress, and like finding more of a work-life balance. And so then hopefully that has improved their moods.
Yeah. I think that's been huge is COVID.
Yeah.
I think people like kind of took a backseat and like they're working from home, or they're being more aware of like what they're eating or how they're working out or things like that too, or they enjoy working from home. So now some people just want to be at home.
Not me. I am too chatty.
Yeah. I have to like be structured and go somewhere.
Yes. I have to have a reason to like get up out of bed, like, and just get out of the house.
Same. I would be just like watching Netflix all day long. Or doing my laundry.
Such like sack of potato.
Hanging a new picture on my wall.
Yes.
But yeah, I think like doing things like yoga, meditation.
Oh my goodness.
Journaling.
Yes. It's so nice.
Walking, different types of exercises.
Get a pet.
Get a pet. Get a dog. Sleep. Sleep is huge for it too. And improving your sleep, which we will get to that as a whole episode in and of itself, because there's a lot of things we could dive into with sleep.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
we have a couple guests that we think you guys would really like that are specialized in sleep, a couple different ways of talking about sleep. So that is to come. But yeah, even it's quality sleep. So if you're sleeping 6 hours, 7 hours, but you're waking up every hour, doesn't matter. That is not, it's not good sleep. If you have sleep apnea, not good sleep. You're not breathing.
Uncontrolled sleep apnea.
Uncontrolled sleep apnea. That can cause a lot of issues when you're awake.
Yeah.
And so knowing your sleep cycle and what works best for you, setting up a sleep, like a sleep habit or a nighttime routine that will help relax your mind, relax your body, you're much more likely to have better sleep and more consistent sleep.
Like good sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
It's kind of the fancy word we call it in the medical realm, but 7 to 8 hours of sleep at least. There's ways to track it, like Fitbits or an Apple Watch or those Oura rings that people have, which are nice, but they're very expensive. But you can track it there, and it's great for recovery, just from your day, from stress. It's also great to, really kind of cut off things before you go to bed. Like, taking a hot shower before you go to bed is relaxing, and cutting out like blue lights and TVs and phones and screens, and maybe even just picking up a good old book and reading it for, an hour before you go to sleep, like really cutting off those things at least an hour before sleep. I think really they say about 2 hours before sleep is ideal, which is really hard in the world of technology nowadays.
Yes.
Like we can't say that we do that. That'd be hypocritical, I think, but it would be important.
But it has been an ongoing effort. Yeah. Absolutely. I definitely did go through a stint of like a little bit of insomnia, and oh boy, you pay for it. Yeah. I mean, it's insane, and how much it just messes with your mind. I remember listening to someone talk about alcoholics. They never actually go into deep sleep, and so then they're much more likely to hallucinate because of that poor sleep. Yeah.
And that's so important too for like your body's cells to repair.
Yeah,
like that
exactly.
Deep sleep.
Especially like your brain. That's really the only time that your brain can go into like hibernation mode, like a low setting mode. Yes. To actually, like work on repairing itself. So
super important.
It's a really big deal. And it seems like there's a lot more push to be aware of your sleep.
Yeah.
At least it seems so. Again, probably in the algorithm.
Probably in the algorithm. And like we said, we'll get to it because there are like things you can try, like medications and stuff, which is a whole conversation in and of itself. So we will get to that sometime soon. But other things, the last big topic is uncontrollables, things that we cannot change. Yeah. And these are just things we're telling you because like, be aware of it. It just is what it is. It's unfortunate that, these things happen, but gender is a huge thing for breast cancer. You're higher risk because we're women. I mean, we have breast tissue. We have more things that are there because
the
they are what they are. So put them at risk. That's one of the main risk factors for breast cancer is just being a woman. Yeah. Age is also a big one, So,
yeah, absolutely. Your risk goes up significantly as you get older. And so, but we we have so many cells in our body that they're constantly replicating. Just statistically, they're more than likely going to screw up once or twice
and change. I mean, like, going back
Yeah.
to like the environment exposures, like as you get older, you're exposed to so much more and you have so many different things going on in your
Absolutely.
life. And you, like we said, you just can't really control that at all times. So it's just the unfortunate part of it.
Yeah.
Race and ethnicity, that's also something that you cannot control. Actually, breast cancer is more common in white women than African American women, but this gap is closing. So we're kind of starting to see this be even keel across the board. But African American women are actually more likely to have a really aggressive breast cancer, what we call a triple negative breast cancer, as compared to other ethnicities. So, just kind of being aware of that, kind of, at least that puts it on the radar of like, yeah, I should stay on top of my screening, family history, huge thing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and that's where there's a lot of like push to fill those gaps in healthcare and doing different like outreach programs. I know like our facility does the mobile mammograms and mobile screening, mobile screening bus, and so hopefully then going more out into communities and reaching out to more and more people.
Yeah, which also then kind of ties in a little bit with like the breast imaging, breast density. Breast density is also a risk. You cannot control how dense your breasts are. It's just kind of one of those genetic things that's passed down to you, how you're born, how your embryonic development has happened. And breast density does increase risk because we cannot always see everything that we want to see just on a mammogram alone.
Yeah, exactly. Because when we're looking at a mammogram, the breast tissue or the glandular tissue shows up bright white, and so do small lumps and bumps. And so it makes it a little bit harder to weed through that normal breast tissue to find these little lumps and bumps. And so that's why now it's regulated on all mammogram reports saying what your breast density is, and then you might see a little blurb saying that an MRI can be recommended because then an MRI can show better detail of that glandular tissue. And then hopefully as you get older, that breast tissue will thin out because
hormones change.
And so, but also not guaranteed. I definitely have 90-year-olds who still have really dense breast tissue, and it's just their genetics. Yeah. And so the breast density itself isn't the risk of breast cancer. It's just our imaging. It just makes it hard. Yeah, our visualization. It just makes it a little bit harder to see it all.
Yeah. And abbreviated breast MRIs, I think, are an important thing to ask your medical team about if it's available at the location that you are as well. Another thing too is menstrual cycles and menstrual periods. Starting your periods earlier and going through menopause later. Like if you have that combo, so like let's say you start your period before you're age 12 and you don't stop your periods until after age 55, that's a really long time of having hormone exposure.
Yeah.
And that is a risk. Now it could also work in like 3 different ways. So you could have really early and really long, or even still, if you just start early but stop menopause at a normal time, or if you start your periods at a normal time but you don't have menopause until after age 55. Those are all 3 of these wheelhouses of being exposed to hormones for a long period of time.
Yeah,
which does unfortunately increase risk of
Isn't that so interesting?
breast cancer.
One thing I find very interesting is that pregnancy, actually having babies, can reduce that hormone exposure. You think, oh, well, I'm pregnant. I'm having all these hormones, but it's different. It actually decreases it because you're not going through that ovulation cycling with where you have typically a monthly period. So if you've never have a child, you do actually tend to be at higher risk for cancers.
Yeah.
And so that's something we always you and I, we always take into consideration. We do a whole risk calculation to determine what the lifetime risk of breast cancer is. And that is very important questions that we ask and we input into this calculator.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really important. Another one that is kind of more, it's older. It's an older risk that we don't really talk about as much now, I guess, because I think it like kind of used to be a thing in these women, but exposure to DES, which was given to women mainly in the 1940s and 1970s. So those women themselves had like the highest risk of like having the breast cancer, but even like their kids that they had. So like if you think about that, that would kind of like be my mom's age. Like if like her mom was pregnant and took this DES, which they gave it because it's an estrogen-like drug that they thought would decrease the risk of having a miscarriage during pregnancy.
Oh,
so
I see.
They thought it was a good thing, but I don't really think it was as good as what they thought it was.
Okay.
So it's not really, I mean, I think people kind of know if that was a situation. Like people know if they took that drug, and then they kind of tell their doctors like,
I
hey,
feel like I've had patients in gyn-onc and in this job that patients have said, yep, my mom took DES, and it was definitely something that we took note of. Yeah. So
I thought that was a weird one, but something to also think about.
Something you can't control. Yeah. What? Anything else we're missing?
I don't think so. I think those are the big fives.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I also say too, cancer can come down to a little bit of luck, not necessarily good luck, but a little bit of luck. Just the way that the cells have changed and they weren't able to repair themselves. But thankfully, treatment is getting a lot better. There's so much research, and
oh my gosh, yeah.
Even in breast cancer, it's so amazing the different studies that are going on and what we're learning constantly. And there's a lot of hope. It is becoming a curable disease. We're catching
very
it
curable, very treatable.
Yeah, very treatable. Even late stage, we're getting better and better. So.
I think that's the beauty too of medicine is, it's an art and it's a practice. We're learning every single day.
It really is.
It's, not everybody's perfect at it. We have specialties and specialists and we try our best, but it's ever changing and ever evolving. And we're coming in the world of crazy high tech and technology where that's, I think, really going to start changing
very
down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So overall, though, even though, medicine's changing and things are improving, we need your help too and hopefully none of you ever have to deal with these cancers. And so if we can change something or change what you're doing today and greatly reduce your risk of cancer, way better.
Definitely.
Way, way better. And that's why we're doing this.
Help you. Yeah. So it's a two-way street.
Exactly. We can and we do talk until we're blue in the face about these things. And so thank you so much for listening to us today.
Yeah, we loved you guys being here with us. Of course, a big thing, a little housekeeping tip, because I think I said the wrong email before, but if you have any questions, concerns, or anything you want to ask us, we are always reachable by email, which is mindfullywomanpodcast@gmail.com.
Perfect.
And then you can always follow us on Instagram at mindfullywoman, all lowercase. And we are also now on YouTube with this wonderful video feature you see here. We are on YouTube, and that's also at mindfullywoman. But yeah, we appreciate you guys being here with us.
Yes. Thank you so much.
See you soon.
Ta-ta.
The information that you hear on this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice. As always, please seek out personal care and advice from your medical team.